Doctor Who's TARDIS can famously transport its keeper through space, time and other dimensions. So the fact that BBC Three has recently moved from being an old-fashioned television station to an online media content delivery platform is no barrier to the TARDIS rematerialising in such unfamiliar territory. After the Sarah Jane adventures and Torchwood, now comes another Doctor Who spin-off show. This one's set in a London state school at which the Doctor once worked as a caretaker, which explains this cameo at the end of an opening episode in which teenage pupils have been terrorised by an alien creature.
Look at you! What an amazing team. You'll be able to handle anything that time throws at you. Oh, come on. Cheer up. It's not that hard. It's no harder than all these exams that you have to take these days. Except for media studies. It's going to be harder than that.
Peter Capaldi in the new Doctor Who spin-off series Class. The series has been created and written by Patrick Ness, best known thus far as the author of young adult novels, including A Monster Calls. Patrick is here in the studio. Patrick, Doctor Who fans are famously very protective of that series. So that's quite a challenge, isn't it? To create something totally new that exists within the same universe, but is existing on its own terms.
Yeah, but a great challenge, an exciting one. And I don't know why anybody would take on a project like that if they didn't love the Doctor Who universe. And so I could ask that question about fear a lot. Are you afraid of the fans? Like, well, I'm a fan. I'm not afraid of myself. I've just sort of wanted to get in there and engage. And that's the key word that I'm using, is engage. Engaging with what has been established and finding my own way to look at it.
Your accent suggests that you wouldn't have had a clue what Doctor Who was when you were growing up.
I grew up in America. No, we watched Star Trek mainly. But I've seen it since I moved here in '99, so I've seen it since the 2005 reboot. And I wrote a short story for the 50th anniversary, so I watched a lot of the Fifth Doctor. So
yeah, the clip there, that is Peter Capaldi. He pops up. That gives a kind of a false impression of what's going on, because this is primarily about these teenage protagonists. I've got to be very careful about what I say to avoid any spoilers. But it's about teenage life. It's about the interaction between the pupils at school. But there is this unseen threat, or this seen threat. It's this shadow which appears in the classrooms. Just explain something about the scenario that you've cooked up.
Well, Coal Hill School, now Coal Hill Academy, politics, was featured in the very first episode of Doctor Who way back in 1963 and has made appearances since then. In fact, in the first episode, the Doctor's granddaughter goes there. And it's come back for repeated appearances over the course of the last 5+ decades. And what do you know? That's had some effects on what's happening at the school. It acts like a little beacon to any creature that might want to cause mischief, as the Doctor says. Yes. And our four are kind of inadvertently thrust into it.
Yeah. Doctor Who has always existed as a family show, of course, hasn't it? Class is aiming really for the same territory that you approach with the novels, isn't it? So the young adult. I mean, so what is the interplay between the work that you do on the page for the novels and what you're doing here on the page for the script? Very different discipline, I guess.
Different disciplines, but the storytelling is still contemporary YA, and anybody who's read a lot of contemporary YA, which is millions and millions of adults, won't be surprised by the kinds of things we explore. If you haven't read it, you might be surprised at the richness, at the depth, at the risks it takes, at the points of view and tone that it takes. So I mean, I feel like it's really squarely in the kind of stuff I love to write for young people.
And what about, as I mentioned in the introduction, BBC Three now, if you watch it, you have to go online. It's not there on the list of stations alongside BBC Two, BBC One. So it's a specific audience. It's almost an appointment to view, and there is a different way that young people are watching. Is that affecting the way that you are writing and running this show?
No. No, I would have done it the same way anywhere it went. I just, would have had to fight different battles, I guess. But I mean,
because you're not just a writer on this thing. I mean, you take that American title of showrunner.
Showrunner, I do. Yeah. Well, I mean, you wanted the show to speak in a particular voice, and I had really very strong ideas of how I wanted it to look, how I wanted it to feel, the tone of it, the lighting of it, even. And Netflix also is not on your channel dial. Neither is Amazon, and I think lots of people are used to going online and watching something streaming and are getting used to quality online and streaming. You know, Netflix has some fantastic shows on it.
And in terms of tone, just to give a sense of what people should expect, it's Buffy the Vampire Slayer territory, really, in that way, isn't it?
Yeah, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, forgive me, Doctor Who fans, but Buffy the Vampire Slayer is the greatest television show of all time. I'm going to get in trouble for that one. But the way that it could take a funny moment, followed by a serious moment, followed by a scary moment, followed by an emotional moment, that is so hard to do, with intelligence as well. But, you know, and if you can shoot for that, I always say you should shoot for the moon. You might not hit the moon, but you might find something interesting on the way. But definitely a show like Buffy, a show like My So-Called Life. I mean, there's so much great stuff if you can set aside your snobbery and look at a YA program.
Well, there we go. Patrick Ness, thank you very much. You'll be able to find the first 2 episodes of Patrick's new series, Class, on BBC Three via the iPlayer from this Saturday.